But at least wanted
The music is good.
rain dancing. It really paid off. Thank you so much. And we have a little presentation. I'll stick to the script here. Can you hear me? Okay. So I'll cover up the MMWD portion, and then Chris would come on and he would explain the Novato area and the West Marin area, and then I'll finish it up. That's the game plan. So I'll begin with the service area. As many of you know, MMWD serves 10 cities, all but Novato. I won't read the list of those 10 cities, and some portions of the unincorporated county as well, for a total of 60,000 service connections, or approximately 185,000 people is what MMWD serves. And 83% of our accounts are residential. We don't have any great industry to speak of. The rest of the clientele is institutions and governments and businesses. We don't have much of an industry here. This is a little fun slide that we put together to show you the history of reservoir storage development in the MMWD's world. I'm not sure everybody can see it, but I'll read out the numbers. In 1941, we had close to 10,000 acre-feet of storage. Our current storage is about 79,000 acre-feet. So that's how the journey began in 1941. 48, that rose up to about 13,000. 1954 to close to 30,000 acre-feet. 1960, 52,000. And 79, 62 again. And here we are. Since 1982, we have close to 80,000 acre-feet of storage. So for those of us who are new to this business, it has been an evolving journey where we are. And this has some relevance, as you would see a couple of slides down. This was a question that was raised several times. What has MMWD done since the infamous or famous 1976-77 drought? What steps have we taken to kind of mitigate potential situations in the future? I want to quickly run through a few things that we have done since then. In 1979, we built Sulahule Reservoir, which is one of our reserve reservoirs, and if I remember correct, that's the third largest of the 7 reservoirs that we have. That was done in 1979. The design was during the 76-77 drought, and it was completed in 79. 1981, we began a recycled water program. I don't have the entire list throughout the state, and we even have some national first. I can't specifically recall. I think the first car wash, the first apartment building, and several other things. We started off with a bang, but in terms of amount, we couldn't go very far. I think we have 2% of our production from recycled water. But we did a major start then, and we have been keeping up with that program. In 1982, we expanded Kent Dam, our largest dam. We literally doubled the storage capacity to approximately 32,000 acre-feet, and by raising the dam 45 feet. That happened in 1982. Since 1993, we have followed a path of aggressive conservation program, and we also introduced conservation-oriented tiered rates. We have a 4-tier rate structure, and that goes back all the way to 1993. We have also, since 76-77, we have increased the supply imported from Sonoma County. Just for a little background on that, we get about 80% of our water from our own watershed and 20% from the Sonoma County Water Agency. A little bit of a factoid for those who are the history buffs here. In 1976-77, we did not have Lake Sonoma, the largest reservoir owned and operated jointly by the Sonoma County Water Agency and the Army Corps of Engineers. There was a huge project built in 1986, 82? 1982. It has a water carrying capacity of 245,000 acre-feet of water, just to give you a little bit of a sense. So that source of water is critical and important in that sense. Our total capacity is 80,000. Lake Sonoma is 45,000 acre-feet of water. And the last year, Sonoma County Water Agency supplied something like 55,000 acre-feet of water. So roughly 4 times of whatever their supply is, they have it behind a dam. I think they are one of the fewer entities in California with that kind of capacity. But life is never easy. Who said that, right? There are tons of challenges even with that supply. There is a biological opinion that they have to deal with. The flow through Dry Creek is a big issue. So there are challenges below. But at least you have the source water. If all of us can walk up and get that water ourselves, 245,000 acre feet of water. Now, this is a perennial question that gets asked. The water production and population growth. So we put together a very fun, easy looking slide. That's what I thought till I saw it now. It's not all that easy looking. And I'll walk you through it. The yellow line that you see there is the population growth of Marin County. Beginning from 1965, when the population was about 150,000. Our county's population was 150,000 in 1965. Those little pesky green bars that you see there is annual production each year. And the production numbers are to the left, beginning from 10,000 acre feet all the way to 40,000 acre feet. So as you can see, it dips up and down. The biggest dip happened in 76, 77. Like 12,000 acre feet was the production that year. And then it climbed back up. And then 87 to 92 was our 5-year next wave of drought. It dipped back again. It climbed back up again. But the population growth has been, although minimal, but it did have kind of an upward journey from 150 to close to 185,000 now. So we have added about 35,000 people since 1965. Having said that, let's look at the production. 1969, if I'm reading it right, 1971, we were producing something like 32,000 acre feet of water. Just this past year, we were less than 30,000 acre feet. Over these many years, in spite of adding that many number of people, thanks to a robust conservation that each one of you practiced, we are producing at or below those levels of production then. Now back to where we are, and Dennis, you almost lost the reason for us to meet here because of the rains. But let me take you back to the drought and the source of the drought and why we are. It's a fairly straightforward and simple looking slide, but this tells a beautiful story, depending on your perspective. What this shows is the annual average rainfall that MMWD's service area gets. Our average annual rainfall is 52 inches. We are blessed in that fashion. 2012 calendar year, instead of the average 52, we got 65 inches of rain in 2012. That was a very bountiful year. I joined MMWD on December 10th of 2012. Perfect timing. In fact, the interim general manager, Tom Cronin, he told me, well, I'm giving you all 7 reservoirs spilling. Literally, every single one of our reservoirs were spilling on December 10th. Glory didn't last too long. Rains just left us at the end of December. Since January of 2013, it didn't rain much at all for the next 15 months. Literally. Those of you who are following the triple R, how many of you are following the triple R phenomenon? So that was a setup. If anyone has raised your hand, my chance to explain that goes away. Triple R. It's called the ridiculously resilient ridge. I'm not making this up. January 2013, there was a high pressure ridge right above our area, northern Pacific area, which was 2,000 mile long and a 4 mile wide high pressure ridge. And some Stanford doctoral candidate named it Triple R, ridiculously resilient ridge. These kind of high pressure ridges come and go, but that one didn't budge for 14 months. That's why we didn't see any rain. And if you track back to 76, 77, we had a ridge similar to that then. So when I got into this, before I read about Triple R, I would get out of my house every morning and look up at the sky. Is it raining? After I read that, I started looking up at the sky and started following the ridge. And he also wrote to make any change to that bridge, it will take nuclear-like power, because it's very, very powerful and it has to go on its own.
What about HARP?
Now you're really testing me.
Oh, the the frequency array up in Alaska.
That's related to this. I'm not a meteorologist. My knowledge stops right about this place. Thank you. So, but at least what I wanted to say was, phenomena like that would impact us. That's why in 2013 we got 11 inches. The previous 12 months we had 65 inches. This is how vulnerable we are, and our water supply depends on that rain for 80% of our supply. So 11 inches is what we got in 2013. Just for fun, that was the lowest in 135 years. The previous record was 19 inches, close to double of that number in 1929. So they waited for me to take charge and presented me with this driest rainfall record in 135 years. So close to 2013, with most of our reservoirs kind of dipping really, really below, Tom Cronin, the interim general manager, came to me and said, "I thought you are a nice, trustworthy, smart guy. What happened to my reservoirs? I gave you all spilling, now it's all half empty." It's not like Governor Brown famously said, even governors cannot produce rains. So forget about me. So we are at the mercy of the rainfall. Now, the last bar that you see for 2014, as at the end of February, we had 21 inches of rain. So from 65 to 11 to 21, 22 now, 22 inches of rain, all in the course of 1 month, the month of February. Between February 5th and 9th, we had 20 inches, over 3 nights, 20 inches of rainfall on Mount Tamalpais. That's the report, Dennis, you picked up. And those of you who followed that trajectory, that was the traditional Pineapple Express all the way from Hawaii, literally hitting Mount Tamalpais as almost on a crosswire kind of a basis. Because San Jose got less than an inch. We got 20 inches. And Lagunitas, where we measure our rainfall, we got 15 inches. Just those 3 nights. We could have planned or hoped. My summation, my summary for this slide is, we can't manipulate that 11 inches we got in 2013, nor we can hope or predict the 21 inches in February. But our water supply is so intimately and mercilessly tied to those 2 numbers. So, the good news of the 21 inches, what happened because of those 21 inches? During the month of February, we added over 17,000 acre-feet of storage to our then existing 42. So close to 40+% in just 1 month. So I was before the City of San Rafael council meeting. Some gentleman walked up to me. Who was there at the City of San Rafael meeting? Yeah, he came and told me, aren't times a little better than when you were before us? That was when the storage was like 43,000. So we added 17,000, increased storage by 40%. This daily production number, although it's a little technical, but I want to walk you through it. We were producing 20 million gallons per day before February. Because of the rain and the attendant conservation and people doing the right thing, we dropped it to 15 million gallons per day. So we started saving 5 million gallons per day since the rain event occurred. So the production dropped by about 25%. 1/3 of our production goes for fish releases. There was a time during January we were producing 20 million gallons per day for people and 20 million gallons per day for fish releases. So it was 50-50 at that point in time. On an annualized basis, 1/3 of our production is for fish releases. So, and our fish releases are tied to the rainfall and several other conditions. Because of the rains, we were able to reduce flow releases, in-stream flow releases from 22 mgd to 4 mgd. So we could reduce it by 82%. So a combination of these 3 things, reduced fish flows, conservation, rain, we got our storage back up to close to 60,000 acre-feet as of now. We're short of that. And today, this morning, our 4th reservoir started spilling. Alpine started spilling today. The 3 other reservoirs were spilling. So 3 more to go back to Tom and say, hey, I gave you back your 7 reservoirs. So I think I kind of covered this, but this is the graphical aspect of what I was talking about, but there are a couple of good things about this. So this is our storage conditions in terms of a little chart graph. So the full reservoir capacity is close to 80,000 acre feet. So last year we were close to that number, 78,000. And before I get to the February 8th, as I said, 42,000 acre feet, early February. That yellow line that you see on top is the average for March, meaning our average storage capacity will be about 66,000 acre feet at this time of the year. So our current storage is about 60. So as a percentage, we are at 83% of average. So that's a fairly better place than we were exactly 30 months ago. So we have about 60,000 acre feet of water. I don't know whether we have another slide, but I'll cover that point. How close we came to, maybe I'll cover it later. Next slide. Okay, this is an ugly looking graph with ugly looking implications, but I'll walk you through it anyhow. This is what we call reservoir storage curve for a 24-month period. So that is that lovely wave here. That yellow, nice little wave there is a normal production curve or storage curve. Meaning, if you are in January, this is from January to December for 2 years. So in January, typically we are at 60,000. Couple of rains, a couple of months of rain, we would top off at around 75, 76. And then during the next summer period, we dip down to a little above 50. And then again, the rains come and we go back to 75. So this is the beautiful, normal, lovely life that we lead. But sometimes things happen. So this past year, we had up to 80,000 in January, like I explained, with all 7 reservoirs filling. So we began the journey at 80,000. Rain never happened since then. So we started taking a dive all the way up to 42,000, almost on a linear fashion. Can you see that green line from 80 to 42,000, just this past year? So we were at this point wondering what would happen if no rains come our way. If that fabulous February, March miracle. So if that fabulous February didn't happen, we would have continued our downward journey. So we have 2 triggers in that context. By April 1, if our combined storage is between 50 and 40,000 acre feet, there is our code provision calls for a 10% voluntary ration and a 10% rate increase. And if it dips below 40,000, 25% mandatory rationing and 25% rate increase. So it wasn't pretty at that point in time. That's the only way to salvage storage. Otherwise, it will be dipping even more deeper. But rains came, so that's why that green dent in that green line. I think we are around 59, 60 now. So we have 2 little projections. If there is a normal rain pattern from here onwards, for the next 1 month or so, we should be about 40. If not, we should be about 30 come next December. There is one more trigger. April 1 is the first trigger. Second trigger is on December 1. If our combined storage is below 30,000, 50% mandatory ration. And these are policy prescriptions built into our operating guidelines so that we will prevent that kind of a situation so we can come back up. There will be a quest at the end of this presentation. All these numbers and graphs and charts. Okay, drought-related actions. Dennis, how are you doing in time? 5 minutes? Okay. See, before Susan said that, I politely asked, so that makes it easy. Thank you. I'll skip this. Most of you would have read what we have done, drought-related actions. The board formed a drought task force. A 2-member board level drought task force has been formed. That's the biggest one there. This is a state drought response. The state Governor Brown just signed a $687 million drought relief package. Some of it might come our way. So we have a 25% voluntary reduction request in place. So thank you for those of you who responded to it. We reduced our production by 17%. We can't attribute all of it to conservation. Some rain-induced conservation Either way, we reduced it by 17%. So that will continue till the board takes a stand on it in a month's time. Chris?
Thanks, Krishna, and thanks to the coalition for inviting me to speak today. It's always a lot of fun to be on a panel or speak with Krishna because he likes to talk, and it takes up most of the time. And I really appreciate that. But we work closely together, the two districts, and the current Marin Municipal manager and I have a great working relationship. So first I'd like to speak about our Novato service area. How many are North Marin Water District Novato service customers here? So there's a good handful, and I appreciate that I have a chance to speak with you. So our Novato service area is about 1/3 the size of Marin Municipal Water District's service area in terms of number of customers and population. And we get about 80% of our water supply from the Russian River, with about 20% from our local source of supply, Stafford Lake. So it's the inverse of the ratio that Krishna described earlier in his presentation. Our customers use about 10,000 acre-feet on an annual basis, and typically we have sufficient water supply available to meet those needs. Our challenges this year really, as Krishna pointed out, rainfall, and he indicated that 22 inches of rainfall, almost 23 inches of rainfall in Marin Municipal's watershed this year. In Novato, there's been less than 10 inches. So there's really a different local rainfall pattern between the two service areas. On an annual basis, 27 inches of rainfall fall in Novato, so we're well below that average, and it's not likely that we're going to catch up. Our March average is 3.5 inches, so it really doesn't look like we're going to escape the drought this year. And what I wanted to point out is that this is something that we've been challenged with for a number of years over the last recent period. 7 out of the last 15 years we've seen less than 20 inches of rainfall in Novato. So it's been a challenge to operate that. That combined with fishery requirements, as Krishna points out, on the Russian River has exacerbated that challenge. Currently, our Stafford Lake supply in Novato, which I mentioned was 20% of the Novato supply, is at 59% of capacity. Since the recent rainfalls, we've added 1,200 acre-feet, but we're still less than 60% full, so we've got a long way to go. Lake Mendocino on the Russian River is having a big impact on the challenge to navigate this drought this year. It's only at 48% of capacity, even since this February rainfall, where 8,300 acre-feet have been added to that storage reservoir. And that reservoir is really impacted by fish, and Dean Heffelfinger has heard me say this a number of times. It's all about fish, because a lot of the water that enters Lake Mendocino comes from the Eel River through the Potter Valley project. And much less water is now authorized to be diverted out of the eel to protect the fish in the Eel River. So it's really a much bigger challenge on how the Russian River system is operated because of that fact, and for protection of the fisheries. Krishna mentioned Lake Sonoma, and yes, there is ample water supply in Lake Sonoma, but again, it's all one river system, the Russian River, and there's a challenge and a tension between the upper Russian River, which is in a really drought impacted, and the lower Russian River, which is where most of the urban water suppliers in Sonoma and Marin County get their water supply. Also, Krishna mentioned the governor's action. The governor called for a 20% reduction in water use, and our board has endorsed that in cooperation with the Sonoma Marin Saving Water Partnership, and it's likely that we'll take further action later this spring. We're waiting for the April triggers to determine what that action may be. So our timeline in Novato has been, in January we issued our winter waterline newsletter. There's copies of this out back, and if you're a Novato customer, you received it. And it called for customers to turn off unnecessary outdoor irrigation. And that was a challenge for us because we saw lots of turf being irrigated in December, January, when turf really doesn't need to be irrigated at that time of the year. We asked customers to fix leaks promptly and to participate in our North Marin Water District conservation programs. We finally see that that's coming about. We've added water conservation staff, and we also developed a new program, an ultra-high efficient toilet giveaway program. We're giving away stealth toilets. So now I know they flush, and I know you can see them, but they have the name Stealth. And you can contact the district if you're a customer, and we'll put you on the list to hopefully line you up with one of those. We did backfeed Stafford Lake in February at the request of Marin Municipal. We offered that we could backfeed Russian River water into Stafford Lake for Marin Municipal's later use, and we got 360 acre-feet out of that 1,200 that was added since mid-January as Russian River water available for later use. And over the years, we have expanded use of recycled water in Novato. Stone Tree Golf Course, Memorial Park Cemetery, Fireman's Fund, Hamilton Development, Common Landscaping, the schools are now regularly using recycled water for their landscape irrigation, which saves that precious potable water for our customer use, and that's been a very expensive endeavor by the water district, but we have enabled or been enabled with grant funds and loan funds. The loan funds will be paid back from connection fees on new connections. That's why it's so expensive to develop in Novato. And we have one more expansion of that recycled water system planned to start likely in fiscal year 2016. Coming up, as I mentioned, our board has endorsed the governor's directive along with the Sonoma Marin Saving Water Partnership. It's likely we will hold a public hearing. I talked about it with my board last night on April 1st to consider a water shortage emergency and what type of voluntary water conservation we would like customers to take on at that time. But as I see it, the drought is still on, but it's not a time to panic, it's a time to participate. Participate in our conservation programs, do what's necessary to save water, and at the same time reduce your bill as you're saving that water. Now, if you would, David, move on to the next slide. North Marin also provides water service to communities at the base of Tomales Bay in West Marin. Now that's an entirely separate source of supply. There's no interconnection, physical interconnection between Novato and West Marin. We have local wells adjacent to Lagunitas Creek that serve the communities of Point Reyes Station, Olima, Bear Valley, Inverness Park, and Paradise Ranch Estates. It's a much smaller district, but we rely on Lagunitas Creek, which is a fully appropriated and flow-regulated stream. And as you recall, the Lagunitas Creek is the source of supply for Marin Municipal. The dams that Krishna talked about dam the tributaries to Lagunitas Creek. Currently, Lagunitas Creek is in a dry year designation, and that means that we cannot rely on one of our water right permits, and we will be forced into voluntary conservation on April 1 and possibly mandatory conservation in West Marin on July 1. Now that could change. Krishna mentioned that rainfall on Mount Tam watershed is 22.8 inches. On April 1, if there's 28 inches of rainfall, that would mean that normal conditions would be in place on Lagunitas Creek, and West Marin customers could avoid that condition. In March, normal rainfall on Mount Tam is 7.5 inches, so we could skate by just by the skin of our teeth, but we won't know until April 1st. So we've currently noticed our customers that dry year conditions are in effect, and that there could be a need for further conservation measures being enacted both on July 1 and April 1 and July 1. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Krishna. I just have a closing comment, and I want to repeat this. The drought is still on. Don't panic, participate. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Chris is a hard act to follow. He was far more eloquent than I was. I was all over the place. Two things, this would also come, this is my final point. So in terms of drought resiliency, long-term, what do we do, was the question. So this is kind of the summary of the line of thinking I shared with you. We are vulnerable to extreme weather patterns. I told you, 2012, we had 65 inches. We went from 100% full reservoirs to possible mandatory reductions in 14 months. Unique February storm prevented us from going the mandatory route. Extensive conservation will make it hard for substantial water savings in a very short period of time. You cannot just produce 25% rationing overnight. It has a price, it has a cost. Now our water sources are pretty limited in terms of storage. As we have seen, 14 months of no rain, our storage was kind of challenged. So what do drought-resilient water agencies have in common? So I took that path. Just do a survey around us, and what have they done? They have made substantial investments in resiliency. The last 20, 30 years is a story of building up resiliency. If you really take a close look at several other water districts around us, extensive conservation and use of recycled water, diversified portfolio of water sources. If 80% comes from one source, to that extent you're vulnerable. Emergency interties to neighboring water agencies. I know personally several of them having done that kind of an approach in terms of critical shortage, your ability to move water from a point where there is water to a point where there is no water becomes critical. So that's what they have done. As for MMWD, next steps, as I mentioned, we have formed a drought resiliency task force. So they are trying to meet regularly to address this issue and to really think hard. That 14 months really was an eye-opener. The next time around, we can't just wait for the February rains to come. And thank you, Dennis, for inviting us, Susan. So this is a great venue. If you're not thoroughly bored, invite us back again. The two of us will come and give you a taste. Thank you all.
Now this is the part where you dread a little bit. There's going to be a little Q&A here. I know you were on your phone a few minutes ago hoping for an emergency call from the office, but no such luck. So anyway, I'm going to go around the room here, and I'm going to probably start at that end, and I'm going to bounce around here so that the whole room gets a chance. I'll be right back.
Thank you. Krishna, my name is Jeff Rhodes, and I've got a question for you with respect to recycled water. Do we know now, or have we had the opportunity to study what sort of benefit we can receive as a water agency by more extensive use of recycled water, particularly for large users like golf courses, and can we collect normal tariffs for supplying recycled water to those types of uses for landscape use?
Thank you, Jeff. I'll try, and if I fail or fall, Chris will pick up. We have been doing recycled water program for a while now. 33 North, how many of you have seen that apartment building by the county? They are dual plumbed. I was planning to get in there. So we have even residential apartments dual plumbed here in Marin County served by recycled water. One potential possibility is a connection to the Peacock Golf Course, which is about a $6.7 million project. So we are working. There could be some kind of a partnership to make that happen. So we are at it. That's our next choice. So we are limited. You know, our golf courses are our best bet to the extent possible. We are trying. Did you have a second part of your question?
The tariff part. Are we able to collect fees for service for recycled water?
Our current pricing calls for 2/3 of the potable water price. So we are collecting 63% for recycled water, the tariff that we use for potable water.
Yeah, Krishna, thank you very much for a lot of technical stuff, which I really appreciate. One thing I wonder if you could possibly go back through your statistics the way they're arranged on your website. And I think it would be more useful to, instead of having a calendar year, have your seasonal year statistics. And maybe along with them, perhaps add some moving averages that would allow us to see how we're relating to our distant past and our fairly immediate past, and how that fits in with interpreting our situation. But the other thing I wanted to ask was, you mentioned this last recent major expansion of capacity that had to do with elevating the dams. And would you reconsider doing more of that, like going up to Alpine? I think Alpine could very easily add 20 feet. I think that's something that's very feasible. And I'm not sure about Kent, but would you investigate that?
I suspected this question would come our way. Couple of thoughts on it. As Chris mentioned, Lagunitas is highly appropriated. We have 3 dams on it already. We have Lagunitas Creek, which is our main stream, is highly appropriated, meaning we already have 3 dams on it. So they are used for fisheries purposes, and it's near impossible to get authorization from the State Water Resources Control Board to appropriate more water from the stream, even if you have to raise a dam. That's the current thinking. The last time we raised a dam, there's a little factoid with it. There's an internal thinking. The amount of water we were able to save was, equal amount was to be released for fish. So there is, I mean, the choices between fish and people, it's all one creek. You got to coexist and survive. So there isn't enough water to be appropriated. Yeah,
That's what we're talking about.
yeah, for practical.
One more here.
I know we're not there yet, but the whole idea of mandatory rationing strikes me as very unfair the way it's laid out, because you know who let's just say the homeowners are, who use inordinate amounts of water, and those of us, because we know when we get our bill, we're at the very low end. Because some of us, maybe many of us, certainly not most of us, have been conserving for years and years and years. Is it going to be, if it comes to this point, is there going to be any attempt to require those who are at the high end to cut more, let's say 25%, and those of us who are already down to bare bones, taking showers and washing clothes, maybe not required to ration?
Thank you for that great question. We heard this question and this message from a whole lot of you. We have been conserving, truly, a lot of you have been conserving. And there were calls to my office, they would say, you know, what do you mean? I can't take 1 shower a week. I mean, I've come to that point, you know, where how do I save more than that? There are a lot of conscientious customers in our service area. So we heard that loud and clear, so we recommended to the board to kind of identify the group which is doing their part to the best we can. So we came up with a cutoff point of 4,500 gallons per month in a household. Which is like 6 CCF per month or 12 CCF per billing period, which is 4,500, meaning 150 gallons per day per household. If you are within that range, even for the voluntary rationing, we said, we know you conserve, try as much as you can, but otherwise don't sweat for this category. Same thing would apply for mandatory rationing too. In some fashion, in a very fair fashion, we have to recognize that group. And the board is committed to doing that.
Thank you very much.
One of our founders, Mario Gelati, always felt that he had a burr in his saddle from the WWMD because there are 2 reservoirs that aren't being used. Is that still the case? Because Mario's listening, even though he's up there sending water down to us. Let him know how you're doing with that.
It's a compelling reason for me to be really honest and transparent because I'm scared. I'll give you an honest answer. I think I always give you the honest answers. But yes, there are 2 reservoirs that we don't typically use. Sulahule is one. For the simple reason we have to pump it up the hill to put it into Nicasio. So that's very expensive. Having said that, since we came this close to a kind of an emergency, we have ordered a 2-week, actually 80 hours of non-stop testing of that pumping, which is happening next Monday. So you can tell him that. So we'll keep it ready. Sulahule would be available if need be. But so even with all these rains, I kept with that program to test it, so in case if we need it. So that is one. Nicasio, we don't typically use it unless we have a need to. But I want to have, there's a bragging element with Nicasio. Nicasio reservoir spills the quickest and the earliest because of the shallow capacity, just spills first. So as an operational decision, we decided to drain it first. So we went really low, and that's where we got all those IJ newspaper reports, pictures, beautiful pictures where it was bone dry. That was intentionally done so that we can capture every drop of rain that comes our way. 4 reservoirs have spilled, Nicasio hasn't, for the same reason I explained, because the water gets lost. So we are planning to use both. You can tell your good friend.
Okay.
My question is, my question is actually 2. One is, what are the pros and cons of everybody putting in this artificial grass and plastic? And second, to Chris, does the Redwood Sanitary District use recycled water?
Sure. So I'll answer the second question first. Yes,
Thank you.
Redwood landfill recycles their water internally. They don't send it to a sanitary district and then have it sent back, but they recycle it internally. And with regard to synthetic turf, you know, it is advantageous from a couple of reasons. Number one, it avoids having to irrigate it, especially in the summer, and it enables a lot more play on the turf than regular turf. You don't have to let it rest when it's raining, or you don't have to limit the number of games that can be played on synthetic turf. So even though it has some possible deleterious aspects at the end of its lifetime, you know, the plastic, what do you do with it? Hopefully that can be recycled as well, but it does have a lot of advantages from the users.
Hello. Mr. Kumar, are you familiar with Jim Pryor's report that was done, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago about the environment and he used to be the environmental engineer at the district, and he wrote an extensive report, copy of which I have here, but I assume that, because your predecessor knew about it, do you?
I don't, but in what context?
In the context of discussing the ability to save water other than using a desal.
I have seen that report. No, the thoughts are coming back to me. Yes.
And do you have any objection to that? Is there anything that you prepared that would indicate in what respects you disagree with it?
I'm not contesting that report. That's not the purpose of, I suppose, this afternoon. But I can tell you this. The resiliency task force that I mentioned is to look into all of these options and deciding what is good for the community and what is the path forward. Could be a combination, not any one of it, if you truly dig into it. For example, there's always a place for conservation, and the place for conservation cannot be taken away by any other source of new water. I am told for unit, conservation still represents the most cost-effective incremental source of water. So there's always a place for conservation, there's always a place for recycled water. Typically, this is my humble opinion, Chris can add to it, a portfolio approach is what works. That's how you optimize your community's needs, not any one of it. So that's my general answer, but I'm glad to sit with you and go through that report.
The other thing I just wanted to ask you is, why has the water district waited so long before considering the possibility of giving some kind or preparing some kind of storage capacity when there's a lot of water? It seems to me that this is all after the fact rather than having in advance, since for 30 years we've known about the possibility of droughts, and yet nothing was done to add 30,000 feet.
As you probably remember from my third or fourth slide, the capacity enhancements have happened over the course of the years. So it's not static, or this is a story of that capacity development. But still, we had this 14-month winter, so we got to retool, re-engineer, re-look at options so that we don't get there. It's not that we haven't increased the capacity.
If I just might add one thing, Krishna talked about his resiliency task force, and you may or may not know that Marin Municipal's Russian River water is delivered via North Marin Water District's aqueduct from Petaluma to Novato. And we now have a new agreement with Marin Municipal wherein the aqueduct is being enlarged to avoid pumping and thus avoid the energy cost and improve the reliability of that system in the future. So there's one aspect of resiliency that's just come on just prior to this water short year.
Now, inspired by that, can I add one more element of that resiliency? Chris, North Marin and MMWD agreed on an agreement to backfeed Stafford Lake. To use the available surplus capacity during the months of January and February, we use it to backfeed Stafford Lake, and to be used in the summer. So these are the two collaborative things that we have done over the last 3 or 4 months. Question over here.
I'm just looping back to the issue on artificial grass, and I installed a 1,400 square foot lawn recently, and then I went through an analysis on the estimated savings in water for having done that, and the range relative to one toilet, the range of savings of water is between 17 times and 28 times, depending upon whether your water usage drops by 30, 40, or 50%. So the question that I've got for you is, you're rewarding a marginal use of money for recycling toilets when you could have a far more greater impact by addressing credits for artificial lawns. So why don't you do that?
We do provide credits for folks who change out their turf for either water, drought-tolerant landscape or artificial landscape. So we do that at North Marin Water District.
Marin Municipal Water District?
And North Marin Water District.
I'm talking about Marin Municipal Water District.
Okay, so the other thing is that installation of synthetic turf is expensive, much more expensive than the installation of of a toilet, so there has to be some wherewithal from the customer to be able to make that investment.
As for MMWD, we don't have a rebate program as of now, so we're taking a suite of another round of rebate programs within the month. So I'll consider this too.
Yes, we have a lot of questions out here in the audience, so let's keep moving along pretty well here.
She has been raising her hand for a long time.
Days now.
Why does the North Marin Water District not fluoridate their water and MMWD fluoridates their water?
This is a perfect question for Chris.
There were votes in Marin Municipal Service Territory, I think in the early and mid-70s, which the community requested fluoridation of the water supply. There's never been a vote in North Marin on that topic, and North Marin's Board of Directors has always asked that should the community desire the water supply be fluoridated, that the community have a voice in that. Now that circumstances have changed, there's now state legislation that would require fluoridation of the water supply if money comes from somewhere other than the ratepayers or the taxpayers. So far, nobody's come up with that money to force it on to North Marin.
My name is Madeline Ritchie from San Rafael, and I have two questions for both districts. One is, what is the role of the water districts in working with the planning commissions of the various cities and the county in discussing moratorium of building commercial and residential? And the second is addressing desalination. If you could address those two.
Start with Chris.
Okay, I'll take the second question first. So I'm all for Marin Municipal to desalinate. You know, desalination is a very expensive proposition. I'm sure that you're aware Marin Municipal studied it on several occasions. They're studying it on a region-wide basis in the East Bay now. Whether it comes to fruition or not, I don't know. But as Krishna pointed out and I reinforced, you know, there's a big storage reservoir in Sonoma County with Russian River water that is available, and that's really what we're relying on. And the first question, could you remind me again?
With regard to working with planning.
Oh, we do work closely with planning agencies, and every 5 years, the water districts, both Marin Municipal and North Marin, are obligated to prepare an urban water management plan that looks at what's the existing water demand and the water demand from potential new development as prescribed by the general plan then in effect, and what is your available water supply to meet those forecasts of water demand. And so every 5 years we look at that. We coordinate closely with the planning agencies both in our cities and county to make sure that we have the correct numbers. We even go to the ABAG numbers to make sure that, you know, we haven't missed anything, and do that analysis every 5 years. And the state law requires us to do that.
Would you consider a moratorium? Question over here.
In a mandatory water shortage condition, yes, there would be a moratorium on hookups until the conditions were to change.
If I may quickly add to that thought, the Board of Directors can consider a temporary ban on moratorium as part of the declaration of water shortage emergency as a suite of other options. So they could temporarily ban new hookups and legally when such an action is taken, that water district is required to look for additional supplies. Meaning the role of the water district is that, but if there is a processing scenario, they will consider that. Yes?
What if the drought continues?
First of all, the microphone has.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Approximately half the homes in both your service districts have gardens or landscaping below them for fruit production or just fire prevention, groundwater fire. A simple gravity-fed graywater system probably costs about as much as a toilet to install and is permanent as one moving part, ball valve, and works on gravity. And the added advantage is that about 3% of all the electricity used in this country goes to treat sewage. So why not subsidize gray water? It's totally legal. The fellow that wrote the gray water code for California's name is Art Ludwig. He has a great website, oasis.net or .org. And there's unlimited information. The technology is simple. No moving parts. Why not?
You're absolutely right. We don't have an existing program. We are seriously considering giving a rebate program for that.
We do have a rebate program for it.
Also, as an additional piece of information, there is a very useful informative workshop on March 15th on gray waters. If you can go to the County of Marin's website, and just Google it, you will get it. So March 15th, I don't have the exact time and location.
Hello, there's a article in this morning's paper, very untimely for Northern California water companies because it compares Southern California and Northern California, which may or may not be appropriate. 75% of the reservoirs in Southern California are filled. There are no drought conditions of any water company down there. The most severe thing they said is you should conserve. 8 companies in Northern California are in drought conditions, and Folsom Lake, for instance, is 33% of capacity filled. As the other gentleman said, we need to increase our storage. My statement, I'm sorry, it's not a question. Thank you.
Your statement was very well made. Thank you.
I haven't hit the middle of the room very much here, so.
My name is Doris Bagley, and I wondered if you read in the Independent Journal a comment or an article by George Shee of Fairfax, and he addresses the runoff, street runoff and roof runoff, and he questions with the current technology that these waters could be made available, that goes into the bay and is contaminated with pharmaceuticals and other debris. There is a new or a relatively new technology that can strain these, make it portable, and I wonder if that's been addressed. And I can share the article with you.
I'm not familiar with the article. We have investigated satellite recycled water systems in the past. That's for black water, and it's been too expensive. Essentially what we are doing is we are collecting runoff, and drinking water has some very stringent standards. You have to monitor the water from source to tap. So trying to treat water with even more contaminants, I think is a challenge that...
And he talked about osmosis and straining. That doesn't seem like they're adding chemicals.
And that is like a desal plant. He's very expensive.
Right.
Question here.
Two comments and a question. One, if I read your chart correctly, on water storage additions, 82 was the last year. So what's been done in the last 30 years to increase capacity?
We had agreements with the Sonora County Water Agency. We have limitations on we have limitations to increasing on-site storage capabilities. I mean, you all come to a particular point where you do maximize it, and our climate has changed. getting new approvals for new storage is near impossible at this point in time. That's also a reality. And also, it's not just that. We have maximized it from 10,000 to 80,000 over the course of time based on the available rainfall in our service area, in our watershed. So there are some practical limitations. So that's why we have this agreement with Sonoma County Water Agency now that you asked that question. We have a contractual agreement with the Sonoma County Water Agency for a firm supply of 14,300 acre feet of water, which is half of our total annual production. So that happened since 1982. Lake Sonoma was built after 1982. So it doesn't have to be in our backyard. There was a dam ideally located and situated. So we did go and have a contractual agreement with them.
In the news today and a few days ago, it was pointed out that Southern California is about ready to go online with desalination, producing enough water to export from Southern California. Now, where has Marin, the water district, been on desalination if these guys in Southern California are ready to produce?
Great question. Let me give you a couple of facts which I can clearly state. The water district, Marin Municipal Water District did undertake an environmental impact review process. So we have an EIR which was duly certified and adjudicated too. The highest court of the state said that was done properly. So we have that EIR, and also as part of that journey, now MMWD is required to come back to the voters if a desal is to be constructed. So that's where it is.
Thank you. This is our last question. I think it's appropriate that our acting chair have the last question.
So I wonder if you could just go a little deeper in your answer to the previous question about building, and you did a good explanation of measuring the plans for water with the general plans and the housing elements. But could you talk a little bit more? Because what we know is that there's huge numbers of projections for growth coming into Marin County. So how do those numbers stack up against the water availability, since we've already been told we would have to conserve pretty drastically if the drought continues? Where will the water come from for 900 Plains and Ulster and all of the places where growth is projected both in the North Bay and for MMWD?
Interestingly enough, the forecast for new growth since 1995, when I've been the manager, and every 5 years we have to prepare an urban water management plan. The forecasts for new growth have come down every 5 years. So the districts are responsible for providing water supply for new growth that is authorized by the land use authorities. And we work closely with the land use authorities so that they know how much water is available, but it's up to them to determine how much new growth will come in. They have to balance the new growth. We can tell them how much water will be available.
So you're telling us that there's not enough water for us to continue with lifestyles like we've had now with the drought. How do you tell them there's enough water?
I don't think that is a difficult point to understand, but I think that what we've tried to indicate today is that this drought, which is the driest year on record, there should be water supplies available for everybody, and ample water supplies available. Now there are challenges. There's challenges on the Russian River, on the upper versus lower Russian River. There's challenges since our local supplies are lower this year than in normal years. But we look at that every 5 years to determine a normal year, a single dry year, and multiple dry years. How will our water supply be affected? And the State of California Department of Water Resources reviews all those plans and accepts or denies those plans, and where we would then have to go back and make adjustments, either on the growth side or on the water supply side. But currently our urban water management plans indicate that there is water supply available to meet new growth as projected in the Lotto and certain municipal computer centers.
Susan did look at me, so I was kind of looking at the golf course. I'll just add to what Chris said. I'm going to straightforward fashion state it. There are two functions. One is a planning, land use function, and the other one is a water supply function. The respective board of supervisors and the respective city councils, through their general planning process, determines the density of growth and what kind of growth. It's a very involved process, right? And each of the 11 cities and the county does approve a 20-year general plan. The role of the water district is to provide enough water supply for the growth approved in the general planning process. And then once, as Chris explained, every 5 years we are required to do what is called an urban water management plan. We take into account all of those general plans approved in our service area and kind of make a long-term projection. And these difficulties are not absolute, meaning, there's no water. I mean, you got to think and that's the whole process of planning for a water entity. To line up the required water as determined by the planning process. So that dichotomy, it's hard to explain. You can say that in a more artful fashion, but that's what it is. For now, we'll continue this conversation.
Okay, so, Dennis, do you want to wrap this up, or do you want me to just take it from here? Or?
You can go ahead and take it.
Okay, listen, let's give a big round of applause. Also, just a big round of applause for Dennis, our program host. At this point, my job is to call for a motion to adjourn this meeting. Maria, to get the motion. Eleanor, second?